Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your participation to our international online seminar on natural disasters and risk reduction measures in Vietnam and Japan. My name is Takeshi Toma, working for FFPRI. I chair this seminar in this afternoon. So at the beginning, I would like to ask Dr. Yasumasa Hirata, Director of REDD Plus and Forestry Research and Development Center of Forestry and Forest Plus Research Institute, Japan. Dr. Hirata, please.
Thank you, Dr. Toma, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for participating in the international seminar titled Natural Disasters and Risk Reduction Measures in Vietnam and Japan, organized the Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute. We held this seminar online due to the coronavirus pandemic. On behalf of REDD Plus and Forest-Based DRR Research and Development Center, I would like to make a few words. The fifth assessment report of IPCC has pointed out that there is no doubt about the warming of the climate system based on observation of temperature, sea level, and snow and ice loss. It is reported that the manifestation of extreme phenomena due to the progress of climate change will lead to an increase in the intensity and frequency of torrential rains and an increase in the size of typhoon on a global scale. And effective countermeasures against large-scale and frequent slope disasters and extensive storm surge damage in coastal areas are common issues worldwide. In recent years, unregulated land use change, such as the conversion of forest land to agricultural land in mountainous and coastal areas, has aggravated these damages. Uncontrolled deforestation in mountainous areas, the opening of roads without consideration for drainage can destabilize slopes and trigger large-scale landslides. Once a landslide occurs, it can cause damage to farmland and houses, which are the means of livelihood for people living at the foot of a mountain, and can sometimes be fatal. In addition, mangroves in coastal areas not only mitigate the force of waves from the ocean, but their root system also serves as a seawall. So when they are cut down to make way for aquaculture ponds, farmland, and rice paddies, the function of the seawall is lost, resulting in more inland flooding during storm surges. In order to confront these issues, the Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute established the REDD Plus and Forest-Based DRR Research and Development Center last September, and is implementing the International Forest Technology Development Project to develop a methodology against these issues with support from the Forestry Agency. In this project, we are working on information collection, research and development, and dissemination for the social implementation of disaster prevention and mitigation technologies that utilize the function of forests in developing countries. Vietnam and Japan share geographical and climatic similarities in that both countries have steep mountains and long coastal lines and are subject to torrential rain and storm surges caused by typhoon. Therefore, since this year, the center has been working with the Vietnamese Academy of Forest Sciences to develop technologies for disaster prevention and mitigation by utilizing the function of forests. In this seminar, we will introduce the actual situation of natural disasters in mountainous areas and coastal areas from both countries and discuss the needs and possibilities for the development of the forest-based disaster prevention and mitigation technologies. I hope that this seminar will provide an opportunity to utilize the disaster prevention and mitigation functions of forest. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hirata. Now we would like to have speech by guest of honor from Mr. Takashi Yamazaki, Director, International Forestry Corporation Office, Forestry Agency, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery, Japan. Mr. Yamazaki, please turn on your video and microphone.
Thank you, Thomas-san. Good afternoon. I'm Takashi Yamazaki, Director for International Forestry Corporation Office, Forestry Agency, MAF Japan. First of all, I would like to thank all the people joining our workshop today. I also would like to thank FFPRI and WAFS, the organizers, for managing this occasion online in this pandemic of COVID-19. Now, serious climate change causes the unusual typhoons and torrential rains, which lead to mountain disasters and high tide worldwide. I hear there was a typhoon in central region of Vietnam this October. Let me take this opportunity to express my sincere condolence to the people who have a difficult time through serious damage. As in Article 7 of the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Prevention, cooperation adaptation measures in climate change is recognized. We believe that forests will play an important role in the field of disaster prevention and mitigation as a typical example of nature-based solution. As many countries and the United Nations are focusing on green recovery, there is growing interest worldwide in taking reconstruction measures from the COVID-19 pandemic by environmental conservation. In this context, it is important to promote the disaster prevention and mitigation technologies by utilizing forests. In this workshop, mountain disasters and high tide disasters and their countermeasures will be discussed. As Dr. Hirata mentioned, both Vietnam and Japan have steep mountains and long coastlines, and they have developed knowledge and technologies for disaster prevention and mitigation. I believe it is meaningful to share and discuss that knowledge both countries that have something in common, not only for both countries, but also for broader dissemination. The Japanese government has implemented JICA technical cooperation projects in the field of forests in Vietnam with MAD. I worked for Global Environment Department of JICA until last March, and I participated in the annual review meeting of Sustainable Natural Resource Management Project, which was held in Dien Bien Phu last December. In addition to JICA projects on sustainable forest management, REDD Plus, biodiversity conservation, the top research institute in forest field in both countries collaborate to carry out R&D on the role of forests in disaster prevention and mitigation is wonderful, I believe. Thank you again for your participation, and I wish a fruitful discussion in this workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Yamazaki. Next, let me ask Professor Dr. Vo Dai Hai, President, Vietnam Academy of Forest Sciences, for keynote speech. Professor Hai, please turn on video and microphone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yasumasa Hirata, Dr. Takashi, distinguished guests. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Greeting from Vietnam. First of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Hirata and FSPRI for giving me this opportunity to have a few words in this important meeting. We all know that climate change is a key environmental challenge, and it is affecting countries and regions. Vietnam is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. Climate change has been causing increasing natural disasters. Natural disasters include flood, coastal erosion, landslides, etc. And you know that this year in central part of Vietnam has been suffered seriously from floods and landslides. Forests plays an important role in mitigating natural disasters and climate change. They help regulate water runoff and reduce landslides, particularly in mountainous areas. However, the development of forest-based solutions for natural disasters mitigation and management is still limited. Our research on development of technologies to enhance the function of forests for disasters prevention and mitigation in Vietnam is very helpful in this context. I would like to take this opportunity once again to thank the FFPI for implementing this meaningful research collaboration and organization of these meetings. I hope you all have a good meeting to share information and the collaboration plan. Wishing you all good health and success, especially in the new year to come soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Hai. Now we'll have two presentations for mountain disasters. The first presentation by Dr. Phu Tan Phuong, Deputy Director in charge of International Cooperation Science, Vietnam Academy of Forest Sciences. The title of presentation is Mountain Disasters and Disaster Prevention Measures by Forest in Vietnam. Dr. Phuong, please turn on your video and microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Phuong. I am the Deputy Director of the Science Postgraduate Training and International Cooperation. I am in charge of the international cooperation in the Vietnam Academy of Forest Science. So I have been working here since 1994. So it's a great pleasure for me to join this meeting. And I will be talking about the mountain disaster and the disaster management in Vietnam. So sorry for the technical issue. So again, I will be talking about the mountain disaster and disaster prevention in Vietnam. So first of all, I would like to give some very quick information on 2019 figure on Vietnam. So we have a total area of 331 square kilometer. The capital is in Hanoi here in the far north of Vietnam. And the total population is 90 million people. And of that, 35% of the population living in the urban area. We have the country here divided into 63 provinces, and the GDP growth rate is 7%. Total GDP for 2019 is 267 billion US dollar. And GDP per capita is 2,700, and the poverty rate now is 4%. About the forestry sector, this is data for 2019. We have almost 15 million hectares of forest, equivalent to almost 42% of the forest cover. The forests in Vietnam are divided into 3 types of forest according to the use purpose. This is about the special use forest, 2.2 million hectares. This forest is mainly for biodiversity conservation, like a national park, protected area, biosphere. Second is protection forest. It's covered 4.6 million hectares. It including the watershed protection forest and the coastal protection forest, including the mangrove forest. And we have here is 7.8 million hectares of production forest. This type of forest is mainly for timber production. And the forests are allocated to the different owners. So we have almost 1 million forest owners who are managing the forest. And in terms of tenure, so 60% is a state-owned forest. It means the government manages the forest. The government is the owner. And 40% is a private forest. So in 2010, 2019, annually, we have a total emission from the forestry sector is 22.5 million tons of CO2. But we also have a carbon remover. Annual sequestration is minus 40 million tons of CO2. For this timber, this is the 18.5 million cubic meter have been harvested for the 2019, and we are still importing the wood from different countries. About 7 million cubic meter of wood was imported in 2019. And we have 4,500 wood processing enterprise. And of that, we have 515 FDI company working in the wood processing sector. We have almost more than 11 billion US dollar for wood export value. So Vietnam is now number 5 in the world of the largest wood exporter. So we also import value about 2.5 billion for timber imported, and the forest sector only contribute to about 2.3% of GDP in the country. And this figure is about 130 million US dollar revenue from the payment for environmental services. This is a national policy of Vietnam. So this is a different picture of the natural forest disaster risk and disaster. We have flooding in lowland area, and we also have some kind of flash flood in mountainous area. In the event that the weather has very, very abnormal or extreme weather condition, like sometimes rainfall is very high in a day, like 500 millimeter in a day. So it causes a lot of flood. The second here is you can see is erosion of the coastline. So we have more than 3,000 kilometers of coastline. So the sea level rise, and then it's also influenced a lot of the coastline, particularly the erosion of coastline. Here is the landslide in the mountain area when the government starts develop the infrastructure like the road system, and with the rainfall and with the extreme climate conditions, so it also makes like this landslide. Drought is also one of the disaster in some part of Vietnam, like the central part of Vietnam, also suffering from the drought, and it got a lot of the damage to the farmer. Like here is a dry cultivation but no water. Here is a frost only happen in the high peak, high mountain area, so it's also cause damage to the farmer. They are growing flower and vegetable, and sometimes the temperature going down, and it makes like this. It's happen not frequently, but sometimes it's happen depending on the extremely climate condition. So this is you can see here some data on the projection of the rainfall and temperature. So this is the rainfall fall map on the right here is the projection of temperature change to the mid of the 21st century, and this is the end of the 21st century. You can see the red color here means the temperature increased quite significantly. So the north is projected to be hotter, and some part of the central highland and the southern part also become hotter in the year of the 21st century. So you can see here the temperature is said to be increased between 1.9 to 2.4 degrees Celsius, and rainfall may increase from 5 to 15%, and sea level rise may increase by 33 up to 75 centimeters. So the more extreme climate even will come to Vietnam. And here's the rainfall. You can see the color change is the area here is about the increased rainfall in the future. So a lot of change. So we have already the climate change scenario to 2000 to the end of this century. About the natural disaster loss, you can see here it's caused a lot of damage and loss. According to our data, we have some statistics of the average loss from 19 to 2012 is annually is about 0.4 billion. But in this year, from the 2006 to 2019, annually loss and damage in monetary term is about 1 billion. But the World Bank said that it's more than that. It's about 10% of GDP in Vietnam is lost annually by natural disaster. So here is the detail of the data loss. We also have here is the average loss is almost 1 billion, and here is the chart showing the different type of the losses like a landslide, drought, flood, and storm. So mainly the damage from flood and storm cover or account for majority of the losses in the natural disaster. About the natural disaster management, we already set up the system for managing the natural disaster. Here is the government. You can see they have it had two committees to support the government to manage the disaster in Vietnam. First is the National Committee for Incident Disaster Response and Search and Rescue. This is under the military. So it's the military is the main force for incident disaster response and rescue. The second here is the Central Steering Committee for Natural Disaster Prevention. It's under Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and also the other member from Line Ministry. So it also led by Deputy Prime Minister. It's a very, very high level. So in each committee, we have a standing office, like under the Ministry of the Defense, and also standing office under the Ministry of Agriculture. At the lower level, like a provincial level, district level, and commune level, we also have this steering committee to respond to the disaster. So we have some already legal document to manage the disaster. First is the law on natural disaster prevention and management issued in 2013. And we also have a national strategy and plan on natural disaster prevention. And we have a different action plan at the military level, at provincial level for natural disaster prevention. And this one is very important. It is Vietnam Disaster Management Authority is responsible for natural disaster prevention in Vietnam. But for rescue, for incident disaster is under the military forces. So you can see here. So in our management of the natural disaster, we have 4 on-site response approach. So the first one is you can make the decision at the site. It means that the responsible have to make the decision at the site happening with the natural disaster. They have to prepare their own personal forces to be ready to provide the support to the disaster area. They also have to prepare the means and material for the disaster response and other like logistics and everything. So this is our 4 approach that is given to the different level to make the decision when the natural disaster happen, or in some time they can control the natural disaster. So the Vietnam Disaster Management Authority can help develop the strategy, policy, and plan for natural disaster response for approval. The government will make the warning for incident disaster. So this is about our approach. The whole system have the responsibility for natural prevention. So this is one of the example we show here is the one kind of the making the policy and strategy. So first they already have to identify the most vulnerable area to natural disaster. Here's the map showing the red here is the area are very vulnerable to the landslide. So the government already invested in making this map for already here is 14 provinces, 15 provinces in the northern part of Vietnam already. Here is all province already have the map on the landslide risk. So you can see most of them are in the north and 2 provinces in the central Vietnam. So the map is scaled at 1 by 50,000. So it's not so much detail, but it's quite a large. So we can see the different color here, the different color showing the risk and here. So this map very important for integrating into the planning, like the land use. Sometimes they need to move the people from the vulnerable area to the more safety areas, like the resident area, and they also use it for development of for prepare the development plan in the province at the district level. All the map also put on the website so the people can zoom in, zoom out, and can have a different layer for the information. For example, the most dangerous area, the points that are more vulnerable to landslide, and so on, and also the main stream system, river system, and the boundary of the different district, commune, and so on. So the people can have a different selection of the information to see on the map. Is provided online by the Vietnam Disaster Management Authority. So the second one is very important for disaster management is to provide a risk forecast and warning. Particularly, we focus on early one. warning. So this is normally we get information from the National Center for Meteorological Forecasting. So they provide all the information normally a week ago or something like that. So this is very important information for Central Steering Committee for Natural Disaster Prevention make the decision on response measure and the warning. So all the warning will be delivered to the different level to ask them to be ready for the natural disaster response. So all this also broadcasted on the TV. You can see here in the weather forecast on the national television. They also make the warning indicating where is high rainfall and where is a high risk to the landslide, and so that the local authority have information and direction from the steering committee to make all the response action, including the movement of people in vulnerable area if needed. So it's a very effective like this. The third prevention measure I would mention here is about the community-based natural disaster response. So the government still have some support program in terms of awareness raising, capacity building, and also like here, also supports the local people to move from the vulnerable area to the safe area when the typhoon comes. So a lot of people are supported to do that. So the people also, local people also can join in the action of preparing the risk map and response plan, so they can develop themselves based on their knowledge, based on their understanding, because they are living in that area for a long time, so they can know. And they also are provided with some exercise or action to respond to the natural disaster if it happens. So all this skill is very important for the local people. They have to know that. And the fourth prevention measure we do is we have to replanning the resident area. So in mountainous area, some area in vulnerable area in the slide, and the government also provides support to help them with that. And they also can support to improve the houses to better resist to the disaster. For example, like the roof can be blown by the strong wind. So the government also have a different material to support the people. And for the agriculture, the government also support local people to change the crop production, like to better adapt to new climate condition. And the next is very important is about the forest management and restoration. So we also, government also invested a lot in the forest management and reforestation. So that is the key measure. Of course, we have some challenges in the natural disaster management and response. First is about the forecasting capacity is still limited and lack of detail. For example, in particularly the extreme climate condition, even like a flash flood, landslide, and coastline erosion. For flash flood, it's very, very difficult to make the forecast. It's one of the challenges. So we need to have a more, research input and also the technology like AI, for example, and then we can make a good forecast and good warning before the natural disaster can be happen. Something like that is about forecasting capacity. Second is about lack of the technical requirement and investment for construction in mountainous area to mitigate disaster. You can see a lot of, with the economic development in Vietnam, a lot of road system has been constructed in the mountainous area, but because of the limited funding, limited investment, so the construction for the landslide is not so much invested or not sufficiently invested. So that's why we still face with the landslide. The third gap is the gap between the understanding the role of the forest and other land use in reducing the natural disaster. We know the forest is very important to to mitigate the natural disaster, but we don't know how much area is needed and then where the forest should be in that area, and what is the quality structure of the forest tree composition to be planted to better or to improve the capacity of the forest in the mitigating the natural disaster. So I think this is about the knowledge gap, so it's very important and it's also very needed for the policy making people. And the next challenge is limited integration of natural disaster prevention into planning and development. Actually, it's quite very, very difficult because we need some more guideline. We need to have some more policy to guide how to include, how to integrate the disaster prevention measure into the planning. So that is still lacking. So different level, like local level, is still don't know how to do with that. So that is one of the gap. So that is also for my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fong, for your comprehensive presentation. I can update my knowledge on Vietnam, especially the seriousness of natural disasters, and also how you are tackling with that risks. And also, it's very nice to hear about that. And let me move to the next presentation. Types of mountain disasters occurring in Japan and research on them by Dr. Takashi Okamoto and Dr. Wataru Murakami, Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Takashi Okamoto from FFPRI, Japan. In today's presentation, I'd like to show the sediment-related disasters and the countermeasure works in Japan, and some of our recent surveys of the disasters. In today's presentation, there are 4 topics. First, I will show you some recent sediment disasters in Japan caused by heavy rains or earthquakes. Next, I will talk about our concept of FDRR, which is Forest-Based Disaster Risk Reduction, and how it reduces the sediment disasters. After that, I will show some of the countermeasure works in Japan to mitigate sediment disasters. Finally, I will introduce some of the latest survey technologies used for sediment disasters in Japan. Now, let me start by introducing the recent sediment disasters in Japan. Japan is a mountainous country located in one of the most tectonically active zones in the world. The basement rocks of the mountains are often fractured by severe folding, volcanic, and seismic activities. Japan also has a monsoon climate, which brings heavy rainfalls from fronts and typhoons. As a result, landslides and debris flows frequently occur, caused by heavy rains and earthquakes. To begin with, let's take a look at some of the recent landslides that have occurred in Japan. This photo shows a lot of landslides caused by heavy rainfalls in the northern Kyushu district in July of 2017. A total of 43 people lost their lives in the disaster. Now, I will discuss the relationship between the amount of rainfall and locations of landslides in the damaged area. In this figure, the location of landslides are plotted. as the red circles on the rainfall distribution map. There are a total of 1,713 landslides on the map. The rainfall indicates the total amount in 12 hours. Blue areas here indicate rainfall of less than 400 millimeters, and green to orange areas indicate rainfall of 500 millimeters or more. From this figure, we can see that landslides are concentrated in areas with rainfall of 500 millimeters or more in 12 hours. Thus, the occurrence of landslides has an extremely close relationship with the amount of rainfall. Next, let's take a look at landslides caused by an earthquake. This photo shows one of the shallow landslides which occurred in Hokkaido in 2018, triggered by a strong inland earthquake with a moment magnitude of 6.6. The earthquake triggered many landslides in the thick tephra deposits, and 43 people lost their lives. So far, we have talked about the recent sediment disasters in Japan. Now, let's move on to the next topic, FDRR. Recent years, the number of sediment disasters in Japan has dramatically reduced. This is due to the recovery of forests. The Forest-Based Disaster Risk Reduction, FDRR, takes advantage of the characteristics of local forest ecosystems to enhance sustainable resilience against sediment disasters. The FDRR program will become an even more important tool for climate change adaptation and disaster mitigation. Here, I will show you a successful practice of forest recovery. The Kuzo Watershed was devastated until around 1955 by overlogging, forest fires, and sulfurous acid gas emitted from copper smelting plants. After that, the Forestry Agency in Japan started a large-scale afforestation project using the most advanced technology available at the time, and the forest was almost completely recovered 55 years later. So, how do forests prevent sediment disasters, especially landslides? The keyword is root. Let's take a look at cross-section of a hill slope here. Tree roots grow in various directions in the ground, like here, and some of them reach the potential sliding surface under the topsoil here. These roots reinforce the shear resistance of soil and prevent landslides. Recent studies have also pointed out that roots in the topsoil here also have the function to prevent landslides by reducing the deformation of the topsoil layer. Next, I will show you a study that demonstrated that forest clear cutting increases landslides. In the northern part of Mount Ichibusa in Kyushu district, large-scale clear cutting was carried out in the late 1960s after that, many landslides occurred by rainfall in the areas that had been cleared, like this. But very few occurred in the areas that had not been cleared. Thus, we can see that forests have an important function in preventing landslides. Now, from here on, I'd like to introduce some practices of construction works and latest surveys against sediment disasters in Japan. Japan has suffered from many sediment disasters over the years, and we have learned from experiences that forests have the functions to mitigate them. Based on the experiences, Japan has developed construction works and field survey techniques to recover forests in degraded mountainous area. First, I will show you the check dams. In this picture, you can see 3 check dams, this, and this. The check dam don't have a water storage function, but deposit sediment behind themselves, like this. The deposit sediment partially reduces the stream gradient and fixes the slope to help the forest recover. Next, I will show you another construction work. In this picture, simple terracing works are installed on a degraded slope. The simple terracing works are steps made of 10 to 20 centimeters diameter logs to prevent sheet erosion and make a good environment for plants to grow. Planting can also be done between the steps. Now, following the countermeasure works, I'd like to introduce the latest surveys. Recently in Japan, airborne laser survey is often used in disaster areas. Airborne laser survey is a LiDAR technology which measures detailed shape of the ground and forest by emitting laser pulse from the sky. The figure on the left is a detailed elevation profile of a mountainous area created using airborne laser survey. The plotted points indicate the location and height of trees. The blue dots, like this, indicate a tree height of about 10 meters, while the red dots indicate about 30 meters. Airborne laser survey can quickly determine the topography of a disaster area. Recently, an UAV is often used to survey disaster areas. By flying a UAV from a remote location to the disaster site, we can obtain videos and images immediately after the disaster. By using multiple shots, 3D image like this can be generated. Finally, I'd like to address future issues. As climate change progresses, the frequency of heavy rainfall events of short duration is on the rise in Japan. Increasing the frequency and magnitude of extreme weather events will cause more severe sediment disasters. to prevent landslides caused by extreme events, it will be important to develop adaptive technologies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Okamoto and Dr. Murakami, for your informative presentation. I hope our experience in Japan will be useful to Vietnam and also other countries with slope mountain topographies. Now, I would like to start Q&A session to the first of two presentations. Dr. Fong and Dr. Murakami, please keep turn on your video and microphone. I received two questions and ask you one by one. The first question is for Dr. Okamoto and Dr. Murakami. How will you use the data measured by LiDAR or UAV for controlling landslide and forest management?
Okay. Thank you for your question. I'm Murakami. I will answer your question. As we mentioned in our slide, the data measured and captured by LiDAR and UAVs can first be used to quickly and in detail understand and monitor the disaster or forest situation. In addition, by comparing the data acquired multiple times, it is possible to identify slopes with high landslide risk and the amount of landslide displacement. Furthermore, as shown in our slide, the distribution of tree location, species, tree height, and density of standing trees on a slope can be determined. And by using this information, the amount of wood and biomass in the forest can be easily determined. This information, together with topographic information, can be used for forest management, such as road construction, logging, afforestation, and subsequent management planning to prevent the slope disasters, we think. Thank you.
Thank you for your clear answer, Dr. Murakami. Let me move to the second question. It is to Dr. Fong. In this year, we were very sorry to hear the news on serious damages caused by strong typhoons in mountain areas of your country. What kind of forestry techniques do we need to develop for reducing impact of such disasters? Dr. Fong, kindly share your idea.
Thank you very much for the question. According to us, in my opinion, I think first of all, we need to have the sufficient and the good understanding on the driver and the causes for making the disaster. There are several key drivers associated with the natural disaster. First is extreme weather condition. For example, in central part of Vietnam this year, over 20 days in October, we have heavy rainfall. The rainfall is about 1,000 to 2,000 millimeter in only 20 days. So that is making, in some places, rainfall can reach up to 3,000 millimeter in 20 days. It's too much rainfall in the short period of time. So that is making, the water in the soil to become, saturated or something like that, and it become very big problem. And the second driver, I think, is about the construction of road system in mountain area. Without sufficient prevention measure like you have already shown on the slide by Dr. And then the third one is the impact of the forest management on hydrological feature in that area. So I think the first driver we can't manage because it's the weather event, and then it will be more serious if we put that in the climate change context. So what we can do, I think we can address the second driver and the third driver is about the construction of road, how to have a good construction road to prevent the landslide. And the third driver is how we can have a sufficient intervention into the forest management, including the different kind of, the location, distribution, tree species, how to do the logging as well. So I must say that by now we don't have any specific forestry-based measure for disaster prevention. We only think that we plant more trees, we plant more forest, but actually maybe in most vulnerable areas we don't have a forest, for example. So I think it's very important for me. I think we should have a very good map on the vulnerable or the disaster risk, something like that. And if we have this map, and then we can know which area we should have a forest managed in the good way or towards the mitigation of natural disaster. So I think we need this evidence for Vietnam. I think based on your experience, I think it's a very good lesson to share with us about how to do the good mapping of the natural disaster risk, and then how to transfer those information into the policy, into the planning. I think this is important. So we don't know how much area should be or needed to cover this area, and what species should be the best for mitigation of disaster in terms of like if we only consider the disaster prevention, maybe we should look at the tree species have a very good root system, for example, strong root system or better root system to cover or to fix the soil, something like that. So it means, we need to develop some kind of guideline for the forest management for the natural disaster management or prevention. So that is my idea. So thank you very much.
Dr. Fong, thank you very much for your comprehensive answer to the difficult question. I hope our collaborative research can tackle those challenges, especially for the second and third drivers, so road system and also impact on forest management. I personally want to continue this important discussion, but time has come to move the next part of this seminar. We may have time to discuss further on this issue at the general discussion later. So we will have two presentations on mangrove forest. The first one is coastal disasters and disaster prevention measures by mangrove forest by Dr. Nguyen Thuy Minh Linh, Vietnam Academy of Forest Science. Dr. Linh, please turn on your video and microphone.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. You can call me Leng for short. I have been working for Research Institute for Forest, Ecology and Environment, such under Vietnamese Academy of Forest Science. I have been working for many years in mangrove sector, and also my PhD thesis also focus on mangrove in response to climate change. So that would be nice for me today to enjoy this meeting to share my experience on the coastal disaster and disaster prevention measures. Okay, so let me start with my presentation. So my presentation includes 4 parts. I will start with the overview of mangroves, and then the natural risk and disaster in coastal areas, and then disaster prevention measures, and finally I will show the key challenge for mangroves protection and management in Vietnam. So first of all, I'd like to introduce about the mangrove areas and distribution in Vietnam. So the data shows in 1943 to 2000, the mangrove forest areas it dramatically decreased. But after 2000 to 2017, the annually 470 hectare mangrove areas have been increased every year. For mangroves, forests, we classify by protection forest, production forest, and special use forest. All of them, so which protection forest is accounted for the highest percentage, is estimated for 73%. And then is the map, it indicates the distribution of mangroves forest type from the northern to the southern area of Vietnam. So in the northern area, so is mainly coastal protection forest distributed in the areas. In the Red River deltas, it accounted for 6% of mangrove forest distribution in this area, and these are the both protection and special use forest, mangrove forest. But in this area, we have one national park, it's Xuân Thủy National Park, or it's the area of mangrove and wetland areas. And in the north central coast and south central coast, just only 1.5% of mangrove forest distributed in these areas, and mostly is mostly the coastal protection forest. In the Mekong River deltas, this area is the highest mangrove distribution. Is accounted for 78% of mangroves distribution in these areas. In this area, we also have one national park, is Cà Mau National Park, and one biosphere rivers. This is conserved biosphere river center. It's located in Ho Chi Minh City. First, actually, it's mangrove distributed in 28 coastal provinces, but this map is so just the top 10 province with the luckiest mangrove distribution. So you can see here, so in Cà Mau is the highest dominant of species of mangrove distribution in my country, and second, and followed by Ho Chi Minh City. For the northern areas, the highest mangrove distribution in the northern area is located in Quảng Ninh province. For mangrove species distribution, so you can see the mangrove species, the diversity is greatly higher from northern to central and to the south. In the north, we have 16 species, and the central we have 23 species. And in the south, we have a very rich in the mangrove species with estimate for the 33 species. The difference in the species, the mangrove species is mostly due to the variation in temperatures and size conditions, the variation in the salinity and others. In terms of national policies on mangrove management, so the Vietnamese government commits investment in mangrove development, especially secure natural passage for mangrove protection. And we also promote the payment for forest ecosystem service in mangrove areas, especially now it has been piloted in Mangrove province. We also concentrate on investing in coastal forest restorations, a program for climate change mitigation and adaptation. In NEC are also calls nationally determined contributions, which are Vietnam to contribute to global, to respond to global climate change. We also, the protection of mangrove and the mangrove protection and development also were recognized in NEC as a very important measure to respond to global climate change. Forest natural risk and disaster in coastal areas. So I can say we have four main natural risk in my country. The first is the flooding caused by typhoons. For this phenomenon is mainly occurs in the north central coast, south central coast, and especially in Ho Chi Minh City. And for the second natural risk is the erosion of the coastal line or riverbank, which is damaged by typhoon and sea wave. For this phenomenon is mostly occurs in 28 coastal province. However, it most seriously occurs in Mekong Delta River, Mekong River Delta area. For drought and salinity reason, it also have been occurring in almost 28 coastal provinces in Vietnam, but also for droughts, is the most seriously occurring in south central coast. And for salinity reason is now occurring most seriously in Mekong Delta rivers of Vietnam. And this map is so the data on the erosion of coastal line and river or stream bank is caused by natural disaster and coastal damage. I take this data is from the Vietnam disaster management authorities. So you can see since 2012, in 2030, we have a seriously natural disaster occurring. So the coastal line and riverbank erosion in this year is recorded almost 300,000 meters was washed out by natural disaster. And after then, so right after 2014, so the erosion of coastal line and riverbank is again increased again. But you can see just in 2019, the erosion of coastal line and riverbank stop and begin to reduce. So I can guess it have a close relationship with mangrove restoration in Vietnam because since 2019 in Vietnam we have a variety of projects and variety of efforts with the focus on mangrove restoration. So I can see for this sector, this also have a close relationship with the mangrove restoration plan in Vietnam. From this source, we also have the damage caused by the coastal line and riverbank erosions. But the data is just recorded since 2019, 2007 and 2019. So you can see this have associated with the decrease of erosion bank erosions. So the damage caused by the coastal line erosion is also gradually reduced. For natural disaster prevention measures, so in this presentation, I'd like to present 4 main measures. First is the natural risk projection for policy options, and the second is construction of sea dike system, and then the coastal restoration and management, and to provide support to communities. So for first measures, I plan to focus on the natural risk projection for policy options. So according to Ministry of Natural Resource and Environment, so we have a scenario that if sea level rise increase to the low level is 50% to the high level is 100 centimeters. So if with this scenario it happens, so in the Mekong River deltas, the flood area is be counted for 4.8 to 38%, 0.9%, and especially in Ho Chi Minh, will be posed very seriously. Seriously by in risk, with flooding area is accounted for 11.4 to 70.8%, and similar to other areas. So based on these scenarios, so we can have a natural risk projection, and that's from then we can have a development plan and integrated coastal planning and policy development. This is the map. Is also published on Vietnam Disaster Management Authorities. So this is mapping and warning erosion of riverbank and coastal line. So in this website, in this map, you can see the classification of erosions. For example, with the green point is it's just a normal erosion of a coastline or riverbank. But for yellow is seriously erosions. For red point, in these areas, the erosion is become more seriously, but it's still being monitoring. But for purple, this area with the purple colors, the erosion is super dangerous, but it's being approved. And for the remaining areas, is the super erosions. But in these areas, the plan for erosion protection already approved. From this map, if you click on each area, you will also see the detailed data of how many coastal areas occur in specific areas. For the second measure on the construction of sea dike system, so in Vietnam, we take many concentrated efforts to invest in improving and constructing dike system in areas which are vulnerable to coastline and river erosion. So under our effort, since 2011, it's about 903 investment projects have been was implemented covering 1,300 kilometers of dikes, which is estimated for over $900 million have been paid for such project. And for the next measures is about the coastal forest restoration and management. So we strictly control mangrove conversions to agriculture and fishery farming, which are regulated in forest law issued in 2017. We also provide some incentives and support the local community engaged in mangrove production, including livelihood supporting. We implement a mangrove restoration project for climate change, of course. And then since 2008, a total 27,900 hectares of mangroves have been restored, which includes 25,000 hectares reforested and 2,000 hectares restored. And for supporting local communities, so now we have many projects which provide the local people with the flooding powers so that we can support them to against the flood. So you can see this is a flooding house. So, and then we also remove the local people from erosion vulnerable area to the safe areas to avoid the damage of natural disaster. And we also encourage the local people to change the crop, such as in drought and soil salinity infected areas. For example, we can change to the tolerant salinity species, for example. So that they still can keep their crop in this area, but the species is now have been changed. So livelihood development, it will also have been take consideration, and capacity building for preventing natural disaster, also our supporting for local community. But however, for all those things, for mangroves protection and management, we also meet some key challenges. Firstly, integrated land use planning, particularly forestry, fishery, and tourism for sustainable management. Second, we still lack of accurate mangrove area data. So actually, there are different the mangrove data recorded by source now. We have high population and land demand from other sectors. It also key challenge for mangroves restoration. We limited the investment resource for mangrove regeneration because of high cost and conservation. The selection of mangrove species suitable for the context of climate change, for example, in sea level rise, is also an important challenge. And finally, the alternative livelihood options for mangrove forest dependence. It also is a key challenge for mangroves protection and management. So that's all in my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lin, for your presentation on mangrove forest. I can learn a lot, and now I really wanted to go to visit your mangrove forest and working together with you. The next presentation is the role of mangrove vegetation in reducing the impact of swell waves, a review of the importance of coastal mangrove conservation and restoration. Dr. Kenji Ono and colleagues in FAPRI. So, Dr. Ono, please turn on your video and microphone.
Thank you, Dr. Toma. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kenji Ono from Tohoku Research Center, FAPRI in Japan. I am going to present about the role of mangrove vegetation in reducing the impact of storm surges based on a review of the previous researches. In this presentation, I have 4 topics. First, I'm going to talk about the introduction of the presentation entitled What's Mangrove? Then I will show you the relationship between mangrove and human life in recent years. Next, I will share with you about the role of mangrove vegetation for storm surges in shoreline. Finally, I will make a brief summary and talk about future of the coastal mangroves. First, let me explain to you on the mangroves in Japan. Mangroves are one of the 3 types which form tropical coastal vegetation. Mangrove grow in intertidal zone between the land and the sea, like these figures. In general, mangroves have numerous tangled roots that grow above ground of their forest floors and form dense thickets. You can see such a conditions like those pictures. Left picture shows the prop roots of Lisophora apiculata, and right pictures shows the nematophoras of Soneratia alba and Avicennia lumpiana. In Japan, mangrove is not so familiar because the distributions are limited in southern part of Japan. The area is only 744 hectares. 70% of them accounted for Iriomote Island, most southern part of Japan. And Kagoshima is regarded as northern limit of mangrove habitat. And Amami Island chain and Okinawa Island also have small mangrove habitats. From here, let me introduce the mangrove species in Japan. Japan have around 10 species. Left is Soneratia alba, and right here is Avicennia marina. These genus have vertical roots like bamboo shoots as respiratory roots. Next here is Lisophora and Candelia trees. As found in left pictures, Lisophora trees have numerous prop roots around their stands. Candelia tree have twisted roots. Those 4 species generally grow near the coast edge with low ground levels near shoreline. Next picture is Bruguiera gimnolaiser. They have a knee root like this. They grow interior side with relatively high ground levels compared with the former host species. In addition, we can see the Luminitra and Excocaria species in the more landward side with high ground levels. Behind the mangrove forest, we can see the back mangrove species like a Nipah. This figure shows the relationship between mangrove species and the tidal conditions of their habitat. Seaward side is located in the low ground level area, so there is high frequency of seawater immersion due to daily tidal changes. As already mentioned, Soneratia and Abyssinia grows in front of shoreline with high frequency of seawater immersion. In the area behind Soneratia and Abyssinia vegetation belt, Lisophora species make their habitat. Next, Bulgaria and Seriops and Luminitra genus were grown. Finally, Luminitra and Excocaria species and Nipah species, which grow up the back mangrove area, can make their habitat. Like this figure, mangrove make 6 types of vegetation community that distributed from the marginal lower area to interior of the upper area, and those distribution areas were well correlated to the level of tidal zone and sediment types. Next, let us consider how to use the mangrove resources. Generally, some of trees were used as charcoal and fuels, and some are used for timber and wood rot, and land use of some habitat are changed into the shrimp and fish ponds. According to Ajiki and Miyagi report, there are 2 types of mangrove used. One is exconstant use and one is unilateral use. As a coexistence use, if we use a mangrove resource and environment excessively, mangrove forests are degraded indirectly and their area decreases. On the other hand, mangrove resources are often exploited for human activity in a unilateral use. Those uses lead to mangrove degradation directly. If mangrove degradation proceeded, it needs to restore them. Those excessive use of mangrove resources cause rapid decrease in the mangrove forest globally. This figure shows the time course of mangrove area in Vietnam from 1940 to 2015. Those data are cited from reports Miyagi et al. And FAO reports. From 1940 to 1980s, it was the deforestation stage for Vietnamese mangroves. In those periods, mangrove forests were degraded by Indochina War and Vietnam War, and were changed into the cultivation ponds for fishes and shrimps. After 1990s, Vietnamese government led to reforested mangroves along the coastline. So mangrove area is show increasing tendency in the recent 20 years. We can watch the mangrove expanding at the Vietnamese coastline like this picture. In next slide, we will talk about the role of mangrove for storm surges. Regarding the role of reduction wind and swell waves by mangroves, there is already published a report like this. According to this report, mangroves are particularly vulnerable to the impact to extremity events such as storm and hurricanes. And these pressures may be exacerbated such as storm and through the influence of climate change and sea level rise. Coastal ecosystems, including mangrove forests, are increasingly being promoted and used as a tool in coastal disaster preventing strategies. So it is required that much better understanding of the role that ecosystem can play in reducing wind and storm surges. When mangrove forests received large waves during the storm, they are usually found on shores with little income wave energy. Large wind and storm waves can cause flooding and damage to the coastal infrastructures. By reducing wave energy and its height, mangrove can potentially reduce associated damages. Some of the evidence in the previous study suggested that mangrove can reduce the height of waves over a relatively short distance. Wave height can be reduced by between 13 to 66% over 100 meters of mangrove belts. Seawall reflects the wave back to wave back out to sea if tall enough. On the other hand, permeable structures like coastal forests partly reflect and partly transmit the water, like this figure. But in the case of coastal forest, wave energy is progressively absorbed as it passes through the forest. Without forest barrier, the swell wave will run up into deeper landward. Therefore, coastal mangrove can work as a wave barrier. That is, the wave barrier function of coastal mangroves is to reflect and absorb the impact force and to retard the flow of large storm waves to a certain extent. It is generally known to be effective even if tsunami wave is coming. In next topic, let us to consider future of coastal mangroves. According to IPCC report, the observed change in the climate system is unequivocal. And since the 1950s, many of the observed changes are unprecedented. Over decades to millennia, the concentration of green gases in atmosphere are steadily increasing. Atmosphere and ocean have warmed. Snow and ice amount have diminished, and sea level has risen. This figure shows the global average of sea level changes from 1901 to 2010. Rate of sea level rise since mid-19th centuries have been larger than mean rate of previous centuries. Over the period 1901 to 2010, global mean sea level rose by 0.19 meter per year. In addition, IPCC report says that global mean sea level will continue to rise during the 21st century as shown in this figure. Under all climate change scenarios, the rate of sea level rise will be very likely exceeded that observed during 1971 to 2010 due to increasing ocean warming and increasing loss of mass of glaciers and ice sheet globally. Therefore, we can say that coastal mangroves are quite sensitive and extremely fragile ecosystem for sea level rise because mangroves are based on the ocean. For example, this picture is aerial photos of Xuan Tuai National Park, northern part of Vietnam, which was taken in 2019. Mangroves are distributed around the shoreline. Light green area show mangroves. Now I want to show the time series change of the distribution of coastal mangrove in Xuan Tuai National Park from 1975 to 2020. During recent few decades, you can see that mangrove distribution is drastically changed. First picture is 1975. At this time, mangroves were limitedly distributed landward area, not seaward. This is 1987. Mangroves were expanded seaward little by little. Next is 1999. As a seaward area, mangrove distribution got larger. And we can see that land usage was changed from mangroves to another land use as a landward side area. Around here, west side area, mangrove also expanded. This is 2013. Mangrove area got much larger. And it shows the present distribution. During the recent few decades, we can see that mangrove distribution is drastically changed. Thus, coastal mangroves are quite sensitive and extremely fragile ecosystem for tidal frequency and human impact. These figures also show the sensitivity and fragileness of coastal mangroves for tide. Left is Bulgaria knee root and right is Lisophora prop root. Both are exposed on the forest floor due to being washed away by seawater. Also, this figure shows wash away cave-like root of Coreopsis species. Next, those are below-ground cave root of Soneratia. And right one is below-ground root system, whole root system of Excocarius species. On the other hand, it is well known that some kind of mangrove species have quite high production rate of mangrove peat as their growing foundation. When we enter the mangrove forest, we can sometimes see the very dense root mat under our foot in the forest. So we have to consider how to balance between the soil erosion and mangrove peat production as a mangrove substrata. Let me summarize my presentation. For engineering to conserve and reforest coastal mangroves with high resilience for sea level rise, we have to understand the production process of mangrove substrata as their growing foundations, such like peat production, peat decomposition, soil erosion, and sedimentation, and the resilience of mangrove ecosystem for time. We want to continue to study and understand the coastal ecosystem process of mangrove more and more. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ono, for your presentation, review, and idea on mangrove forest. Now, I would like to start Q&A session to the two presentations on mangrove forest. Dr. Lin and Dr. Ono, please turn on your video and microphone. I received some questions, and the first question is to Dr. Lin. Do you have any experience that mangrove forest reduced the impact of storm surge in the coastal area of Vietnam? Dr. Lin, kindly share your experience to us.
Thank you. For your questions, as you can know, there are few studies in Vietnam reported that the mangrove can help reduce up to 80% of sea wave energy, depending on the mangrove height and the mangrove the densities. So therefore, it can help reduce damage caused by sea waves. And it also, I can see in your presentation, it also indicated that the effective reductions of wave height and wave energy by mangrove forest. And the second reason is that mangrove also promotes the accumulation and fixation of mud flats because the complex mangrove system and the nature, such as the process of mangrove. So that by this way, so that the play role well growth in good growth in accumulation and fixation of mud flats. And the second is that this mangrove forest in Vietnam, we are considered is a part of investment in the building the sea dive systems. It's like an ecosystem of sea dive. And however, the mangroves may not have to reduce the salt intrusions caused by impact of sea level rise. So we can have to reduce salinations in the coastal areas. Yes. So that's my opinions about the role of mangrove in reduce the impact of storm in the coastal areas in Vietnam. Thank you.
Dr. Lin, thank you very much for your kindness to share your experience. The next question is to Dr. Ono. Would you tell us how the future researches on mangrove are conserving and restoring the coastal mangroves are able to contribute to reducing the risk of storm surge?
Thank you for your attention. For your question, according to the study of coastal ecosystem conducted by past researchers, it has been to be clarified that coastal vegetation, including mangrove, can contribute to reduce the damage by certain kind of coastal disasters, such as flood tides and strong sea winds and tsunamis. As a result, mangrove will contribute to protect precious island resources, including soils, for farming and vital ecosystem. Mangroves are distributed only in intertidal zone and are controlled by tidal condition. In Japan, coastal disaster prevention forest in the terrestrial zone are sometimes artificially created by preparing a growing foundation, such as piling up soil materials using heavy machinery before planting tree seedlings. However, it is quite difficult to construct the growing foundations for the mangrove species. The reason of difficulty is it is quite narrow range of tidal levels on which each mangrove species can survive. Thus, it is better to find out the tidal level of the area and choose the species which can be survived on the levels. Therefore, we think that it is necessary to accumulate more data for deeper understanding of land suitability for each mangrove species to restore coastal mangrove forest at each region. Throughout our researches, we will try to develop a method to ensure fast recovery and conserve the coastal mangroves for the deforested and damaged coastal area, including abundant shrimp ponds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ono-san. And a new question came to Dr. Lin from JICAP expert in Uttarakhand, India. The question is, who takes care of rehabilitation of mangrove forest? And also, can local people use mangrove forest? Dr. Lin, I'm sorry to ask you to quick answer.
In Vietnam, so forests are almost allocated to the forester. It's under Department of Agriculture and Rural Department in provincial levels. So in the locals, so mostly is mangrove forest is protected by forester. And in some areas, we have some model of the co-management which are involved of the local community to protect the forest. So there are many such as the models which come from the participants of the local peoples in mangrove forest.
Thank you very much. I understand the local people can use the mangrove forest, and that's why they can also collaborate to the rehabilitation of mangrove forest. And now we should move to the final section of this seminar, general discussion, with the 4 presenters of this seminar. So Dr. Fong and Dr. Murakami, please turn on your video and microphone. Dr. Lin, Dr. Ono, please keep your video microphone on.
Sure.
Now, and we are seeing the Dr. Furuichi in FFPRI also ready to answer or join discussion. Let me start this general discussion with a question to Dr. Murakami. Dr. Murakami,
Yes.
you mentioned the importance of the development and dissemination of appropriate forest restoration technology. How such Japanese forestry technology can be utilized for disaster risk reduction in Vietnam?
Okay, thank you for this question. As we mentioned in our slide, in Japan, we recognize the importance of forest management in preventing slope disasters. We believe that the afforestation and the conservation of forest will be important for the stability of slopes. On the other hand, it is also true that slope stability helps trees to invade and contribute to the establishment of forest stands. Japanese hard techniques shown in our slide are first used to stabilize slopes. These will promote the establishment of forests through the afforestation or the natural invasion of trees. The establishment of forests will make slopes more stable, which in turn will lead to prevention of disasters. In addition, the remote sensing techniques such as slope measurement by the LiDAR and UAV as shown in our slide are useful to identify and monitor the areas with high potential of future landslide occurrence. We think it's great if we develop methodological guidance by using these technologies from Japan, which will be adjusted by the actual local situations in Vietnam through the collaborative research and development by both institutes. We hope such guidance will help the sustainable forest management to reduce disaster risks in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murakami, for sharing your idea and willingness to reduce disaster risks by forest management. Next, I would like to ask Dr. Ono, how do you think the role of your research on mangrove forest? Dr. Ono, please.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Before answer your question, I would like to learn from Dr. Lin. As mentioned in my presentation, mangrove habitat in Japan is limited because their habitat are located near north limit and their climate condition is cooler for them, I think. Therefore, I think most of Japanese are not so familiar for mangroves, and the afforestation achievement of coastal mangroves as a disaster-prevent forest are not so enough in Japan. By the way, we have learned that under the relationship of the we have learned that under the leadership the Vietnamese government, the previous degraded mangrove forest in Vietnam have been rehabilitated very well. We would like to know the reason why mangrove rehabilitation projects in Vietnam have been prioritized in your countries.
As you can know, in Vietnam, we have more than 3,000 kilometers of coastal areas. So annually, we have 10 to 12 typhoons hitting in just the coastal areas. So you can see this area is very precise to disaster, especially storm and typhoon. So I think the mangrove, and then the Vietnamese government and the local people recognize us, recognize the roles of mangroves. That is the roles of mangrove in protecting the coastline. And we also according to the climate change and civil rights scenarios. So you can see saw it in my presentation. So under the brick as sea level rise scenarios. So some areas in Vietnam would be put under serious flooding areas. So so we understand that the risk of such coastal area can be reduced by mangrove forest. And in the coastal areas, it's most of local people are the poor people and with a very high population. So if there are no prevention measures, the storm and the natural disaster in such area will be cause a serious impact on access and the livelihoods of people in these areas. And I also come back to my previous answer that the roles of mangrove in the reduce of sea weight and reduce of sea time and waste energy and etc. So the government, in Vietnamese government and local people now recognize that it's the very important roles of mangrove forest. So we take many efforts to for mangrove restoration. I think that's one of reasonable reason for the successful of mangrove forest restoration in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. It is very clear for us. Dr. Ono, can you share your idea or quick response to Dr. Lin?
Thank you, Dr. Lin. It is quite helpful to us in considering the recovery of American mangroves. In addition, we can understand that rehabilitation of mangrove in Vietnam is quite important. We will cooperate with you and we want to learn throughout this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now the time. Dr. Phom, I'm sorry for making you waiting. Your time has come now. Following today's presentation and discussions, what should we do to reduce the risks of natural disasters through forestry research? Kindly share your idea on this big question.
Yes, so thank you very much for raising the question and for discussion. I think actually through the different presentation we have learned a lot, especially the experience and the lesson from Japan in terms of the developing the forest-based disaster reduction techniques. And I think it's very important. First, as I said, is a construction of the road system in mountain area has, I think, contributes significantly to the landslide, but we don't have a sufficient prevention measure for the landslide this time. But like I said, if you already have some kind of technique, for example, stabilizing the slope, for example, or how to do the reforestation in vulnerable area, or how to do the forecast or mapping the vulnerable landslide area or something like that. It's very useful for the policy. So of course, I think the condition in Japan maybe have a little bit different with Vietnam. So we have to also consider the other factor like a climate factor, rainfall, soil type, and so on. All the factors that associate with the landslide even or the possibility of a landslide, I think it's very important. So we need to have all the good research evidence on that so that we can come up with a guideline to make the modification or to, to adjust your guideline to better fit to Vietnamese condition. You can see that Vietnam has a very long country. So from the north to the south, we have a very, very complex weather conditions, soil condition, topography, and the vegetation cover as well. So we need to have very detailed understanding the basic information to make the decision on how we should have a forest-based natural disaster prevention measure. That is, I think, is very important. So that's why I think Similarly to the mangrove, so we should have good research, we should have results sharing, and if possible, maybe we can have a demonstration on how to manage the basin area, for example, how to demonstrate that to the policymaker, and then we can have a translation of those things into the policy. I think that is very important for Vietnam.
Thank you, Dr. Phong, for your comprehensive answer to the broad question. If time allows, I'd like to continue this important discussion. But actually, time already ran out. I should close this seminar. So allow me to call Dr. Hirata for his summary and closing remarks to this seminar. Dr. Hirata, please.
I would like to thank all speakers for providing useful information on natural disaster and risk reduction measures in Vietnam and Japan, and for your active discussions on the need for technology development and measures. Unfortunately, this year again, Vietnam and Japan have suffered big damages from typhoon and torrential rains. So now the effect of climate change become more apparent, and the measures for adaptation against climate change is required strongly. The Vietnamese Academy of Forest Sciences and our Forestry and Forest Product Research Institute will continue to work together to develop the methodology to tackle such a disaster for prevention and mitigation. The results of joint research will be made available on the website of our Research and Development Center. Finally, I'd like to advertise the next international seminar. We will hold an international seminar titled Exploring the Potential of Forest-Based Disasters Risk Reductions online and in Tokyo on January 27 in the next year. We look forward to for your participation in this seminar as well. Now I would like to close this seminar. I'm very pleased to have this seminar successfully. Thank you very much for your participating in this seminar and watching today's program on YouTube. See you again in the next seminar.
Thank you, Dr. Hirata. Before physically closing this seminar, I'd like to send my hearty thanks to all of you to participate in this seminar. I hope this seminar is useful for you to think disaster risk reduction by forest, and we can work together on it for coming years. Thank you again and have a safe and nice Christmas and New Year. Thank you.